Hello, and welcome to the Blue Shadow Podcast. My name is Joey.
I am Dan.
And today we are debuting another new show. This show is called Star Wars is Alive, and this is going to be a place for us to essentially take a concept and rank 1 through 5 with a few honorable mentions of different concepts through Star Wars. Do you want to talk about why we came up with this show, Dan?
There are a lot of, as Joey says, negative Nellies in the Star Wars community, especially after Disney took over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've all seen online the famous meme of Kathleen Kennedy with the red eyes.
When haven't we seen that?
Exactly. If you've been listening to us for a while, you know that Joey and I are generally pretty optimistic, one a little bit more than the other. I'll let you decide on that one.
Depends on the show.
Yes, but overall, we both really enjoy Star Wars. We really enjoy what Disney has been doing with Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of take offense to people saying that Disney is, quote, dying. Not Disney, excuse me. Star Wars is dying since Disney's purchased it. We're here today to help kind of elaborate on why we think Disney is, in fact, alive and well. Alive and very well at the moment.
And I want to say, I don't like the concept Disney Star Wars. Disney purchased Lucasfilm, absolutely. Disney is the overarching parent company of Lucasfilm. But the creators are still telling the story they want to tell. And in our opinion, like Dan said, these are powerful stories that add excellent new additions to the Star Wars galaxy. And we want to celebrate that. So for this first episode of Star Wars is Alive, we're going to look at, as Dan was indicating, our top 5 moments from recent Star Wars. That being since Disney took over or purchased Lucasfilm. This is from anything that released from 2012, essentially Star Wars Rebels-ish, through today, which the most recent thing that released was The Acolyte. So we have a few honorable mentions we'd like to do. Dan, why don't you go through all of yours, and then I'll go through all of mine, and then we'll trade off on the main list.
So my honorable mentions, the first 2 are pretty overarching, very broad. And the first one is Star Wars animation in its entirety.
Very broad.
Very broad. That encompasses Bad Batch, Clone Wars, Rebels, Young Jedi, which I haven't seen. I hear it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Resistance, a crucial piece of Star Wars. And Visions. I love Visions. I love what they did with Visions. I love the freedom that Visions gave these different studios.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my first. Go ahead.
I mean, I do Rebels.
Oh, I know.
It's one of my most favorite Star Wars things. And the fact that it really, truly felt like the continuation of the Clone Wars, but for a new generation of children, a new chapter. And not just children. It also is for adults. But I think it gave people, like, for example, for me, I was in like early high school when it started coming out, or like mid high school when it started coming out. And then I felt like I was growing with Ezra, and then it finished while I was like mid college.
I think that's a great way to look at it. I mean, and you look at the Clone Wars too. The kids who started with the Clone Wars when it first came out, original, I know this is pre Disney purchase. But when did it come out? Like
2008 was the start.
2008. I was born in the year 2000. I was 8 years old. And people say the early seasons of the Clone Wars is for kids. Well, guess what? Those who started watching it early matured. And as the audience matured, the content matured.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important that Star Wars was able to do that and allow people to form all these connections over almost a decade.
Yeah, seriously. And Rebels tugs on these meaningful connections that you've created within Rebels, but then also outside of Rebels with stuff like the Clone Wars, with the movies. And I just think it's super powerful. So yes, on to your next thing. I'm sorry. We've never done an episode directly on Rebels, but I think if we did, it would probably be 3 days long.
Episode, that'd be a whole series.
We'd have to like split each episode into 2 parts. Episode of the show, not our episode. Anyway.
Yes. My second honorable mention is Rogue One. Joey kind of rolled his eyes.
I didn't roll my eyes. I just smirked.
I like Rogue One. Spoiler alert, Andor is not on my list.
Wow.
So this is, if you've been listening to us, you know I like grittier stuff. I like mysteries, thrillers. Rogue One gave that to me. Rogue One, you really got an excellent look into the events of A New Hope, the rebellion, everything. And it also gave us the first time where we could really see the Empire on screen doing cool Empire things, in my opinion.
I think while Rogue One is not my personal favorite movie, I think there's so much in there that's fantastic. I love Well, I like the more fantastical side of Star Wars. I love different little pieces of things. I thought Cassian is a great character. K2SO is fantastic. All of the, like you're saying, essentially seeing the inner workings of the Empire, especially on Scarif.
Yeah.
I thought were so great. And we can't forget the Vader hallway scene.
We're going to come back to that one.
All right. Love it. Anything else? You got one more?
I do have one more.
Fire away.
This is a little specific, and I feel like it might be on your list.
Okay.
I'm just going to say the quote, and if you want me to not speak any more of it, just tell me.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
I am all the Jedi.
It is not on my list, and I'm glad you're talking about it. I made an active effort to not make everything just everything Rey does. Because if you haven't listened to us, Rey is my favorite Star Wars character. So I'm so happy to discuss this one.
I'm shocked.
I know.
I'm going to be straight up with you. I didn't think of what I had to say for this because I figured you would take the lead.
I mean, I'll take the lead happily, but I did not put it on mine because there are other moments that, and Dan and I both kind of talked about this, our first reactions to these things. And there are places for things in Star Wars to grow on you without a doubt, but these moments, they grabbed me the first time I saw them. And then they haven't gone away since.
Yeah,
it's my like top Star Wars moments, and these we can situate these into the larger Star Wars saga as well. And I think for me, a lot of these would be right up with some of the classic stuff. But I'm All the Jedi is fantastic.
I came out of the theater thinking, "Oh my goodness, that was sweet."
With all the voices, again, pulling in things from Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah,
it was just such a powerful scene.
It was powerful. We saw, like you said, somehow Palpatine has returned. And what we've seen since then, we know that makes sense. Cloning. Dark cloning.
Secrets only the Sith knew, as Beaumont Kin says.
We knew cloning. Now we know cloning was a thing. Now we know how we got there. And I think that scene, much like the prequels, will just age so much better as we get more information about the sequels and how everything with Rey and how Palpatine came back. First Order origin show, which I think we're kind of getting now.
I love it. And I think for me, I love when the Jedi are super cool, but I think that's often put through the lens of doing cool lightsaber action. I love that this moment was purely Rey deflecting what was thrown at her. She wasn't attacking, she was defending, which is literally the whole MO of the Jedi. And I think that often gets lost. Because people love to see and I love to see a good lightsaber fight. A lot of my moments are going to involve lightsabers, but I think this is just such a powerful way to end this story and what finally, hopefully, maybe, beats Palpatine. I think there is a sense of finality to this for sure.
You would think,
but I think this is what finally beating him is his own inability to give up. Yeah. I think that's super powerful.
Absolutely.
To spare me from going on. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I'm anxious for your 3 honorable mentions.
All right.
You said yours are a little more specific?
Mine are very specific. You want a nice gradient from very, very broad to very specific. So
the upside down triangle.
For me, I have, you'll find that I have very, very, I love when small meaningful things happen, and I love absolutely enormous fight set pieces. So for me, my first honorable mention is the fleet arriving on Exegol. We're gonna talk about that later? Or?
No.
Okay.
You know me. I'm a sucker for when ships jump out of hyperspace,
and I am not really. So it was so powerful. I like the mirror to the Battle of Endor, where it's like the whole rebellion shows up and takes on the Empire, but here it's like taking that and recontextualizing it to be the whole galaxy showing up.
And I think part of that is lost on a lot of viewers. Just the pure scale of the First Order compared to the Empire. And I think in The Force Awakens, they did a really good job just showing how powerful the First Order is when they took out the Hosnian system.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that the entire galaxy would come together to stop them instead of the rebellion.
And the Final Order takes that to the next level with their Star Destroyers literally essentially being little Death Stars.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I think for me, maybe what allowed the Empire to kind of morph into the First Order is the galaxy not being the ones that help tackle this threat. Because it was a relatively small group of people in the rebellion doing this, maybe the galaxy didn't feel like they earned it. And I think that's what helps give me that ring of finality that we were talking about. The galaxy's coming together to stop this evil. And I love, again, that this evil has been consistent throughout every trilogy.
Yes.
Yeah, I could talk about the Rise of Skywalker for 70 years. Anything else to add?
No, I'm excited to hear your next one.
All right. In the room we record in, Dan has to essentially, if he looks over my head, he sees the Rise of Skywalker poster.
You say I have to. It's a good poster. I like seeing
It's a very
it.
good poster. I'm a fan of it.
I'm not
There's
surprised.
a New Hope one too.
It's just out of my way, and then I'm not like looking at you, and I'm not speaking into the microphone if I'm looking at the New Hope.
So you look at the Rise of Skywalker one. Anyway, my second honorable mention is Obi-Wan Kenobi talking to little Leia about Anakin and Padme. It's such a tender moment from the enormous amount of ships flying in.
Yeah.
We're not talking about this later with you?
No.
Okay. I think this is such a special moment where you really get to draw... That show is very careful with how it uses its connections to the prequels.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they kind of like pulled the floodgates away and let it all rush in. And it's very emotional to watch. I just rewatched it. And if you haven't, we released an episode where I kind of break down my thoughts on the show when we first watched it, or when I first watched it, and then what I thought on the rewatch. And this resonated with me even more. What did you think about this moment?
I think with Luke, we really didn't get to see much of Luke's ability to process that he's adopted.
Mm-hmm.
We saw it a little bit in A New Hope in Ben Kenobi's hut. He said, "Oh, you knew my father." And Luke was older at the time. He was, 17?
I think in his teens, 20.
20?
Because it's 20 years between Revenge of the Sith and New Hope.
20. He was 20 years old. Whereas Leia was a child, and just showing how complex of a character she is to
Mm-hmm.
realize that, like, you she picked up immediately, like, you knew my parents
Mm-hmm.
in some capacity, probably well.
Mm-hmm.
And it just tugged at your heartstrings because you feel for this little girl, knowing what you know, knowing what Obi-Wan had to go through with both Padme and Anakin separately, who feels directly responsible for both of their deaths, more or less. Like, it's just the duality of the events that happened and how they affect people around it. That scene really pulled that in.
It's such a powerful scene for someone who's... I think a lot of Star Wars is going in a lot of new directions, which I love. But I think Obi-Wan Kenobi feels most distinctly connected to the prequels.
Mm-hmm.
And like it feels like it truly is something that if all other Star Wars didn't happen, it would have... I think this is something George Lucas could have made.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have sat perfectly well in between the trilogies and,
Yes.
the original and prequel trilogies. And I think it just really allows that connection to like take hold for me.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I move on to my next honorable mention, which this is a very small moment. You might not have even had as strong of a reaction to it as I did, but when when Ezra is building his new lightsaber and Ahsoka's Jedi shuttle with Hu Yang, and he gets to have that moment where he talks about Kanan, and it's Kanan's emitter that he puts onto his new lightsaber.
Yeah.
I just loved it. It just made my heart soar because of everything that you see in Rebels. And I think this is a prime example of something that's made for a fan. Like, if you haven't watched Rebels, it's like, okay, it looks like his master's lightsaber, how cute. But like for me, it like hit me like a ton of bricks.
Oh, the dynamic between Kanan and Ezra, which we're going to discuss. I'm absolutely sure of it, if not more than once going forward. It, like you said, it hits home if you've seen it. And yeah.
Yeah,
I really can't speak more.
We don't have to say too much more about it because I feel like we could get really nuanced, but we don't need to do that.
Yeah.
So with that, let's head into our main list. So those were just our honorable mentions. The excitement only gets up from here. So Dan, would you like to give us your number 5?
Excitement's a little bit of a bold word to start with, because my number 5 is a little bit of a downer.
Okay.
And it is Kanan's sacrifice
Oh,
in Rebels.
it's so good.
So I want to preface this. I based all my rankings on how I felt when I first watched it. And it's things that I've had a strong reaction to. Happy, sad, angry, indifferent. Well, I guess you can't have a strong, indifferent reaction, so I'm going to back that one up. But strong emotions. And I felt terrible watching that scene for so many reasons. Because everybody knew what had to be done. And go ahead.
I was going to say the whole episode leading out. They pretty much tipped their hand that this is going to happen.
Be ready.
They spent this whole episode getting you ready. And I don't know if it's just how noble it was or how like pretty all the fire was, and like his eyes, you see them. It just all wraps together in this beautifully horrific scene. It's so powerful.
Watching it, you and I know, you as the viewer of Rebels know, it had to happen. If he didn't do it, they all would die, and with them, the hopes of the rebellion. Doesn't make it any easier.
No, and like for me, I've talked all the time about how character death is not. I think it's oftentimes used to have power, but I don't think it necessarily is always as powerful as it needs to be. This is a great example of taking a character, and his whole MO was helping people and being like a great example of what a Jedi should be. And throughout the Acolyte, we talked about what is a Jedi? What does it mean to be a good Jedi?
Yeah.
Kanan is a great example of having relationships and attachments, but not letting it consume him and being no. But this is just like the icing on the cake for Kanan's character, unfortunately.
I feel like Kanan and Luke would have gotten along well.
I agree.
Same with Ezra and... Well, I'm not going to say that. We don't know what's coming next, do we?
Who knows? I think it's reasonable to think that Ezra and Luke might meet in the future.
But yeah, I think Kanan and Luke would have gotten along very well.
Oh, yeah, and they might. Well, they wouldn't have. They wouldn't have. Never mind. Unfortunately, I thought you said Ezra. No. It's powerful. It's fantastic. I loved it, but I hated it so much.
It is gut wrenching. You can watch it once. You can watch it 20 times. Doesn't hurt any less. Hurts more. More you watch it because you cherish the interactions you get with Kanan
all the time prior. It's honestly,
I recently restarted Rebels. I told you.
Oh, you didn't tell me that. It's exciting.
I thought I did.
No, that's exciting. I love it.
Episode 1. I'm looking at Joe. He has a Kanan action figure. Can't escape him. Episode 1. You know what happens to Kanan, and it does make you cherish those. Anything he says.
And like, so right before Ahsoka, my wife and I rewatched Rebels, and it was her second time watching it, my third time. And when we got to that episode, we were bawling, both of us. I was like, I am sitting on my couch. I'm a grown man. She's a grown woman. And I am bawling my eyes out over this cartoon. It was worse than our reactions the first time. Or her reaction the first time and my reaction the previous 2 times.
Because I feel like the first time, you're not expecting it.
No.
I mean, you are, but you aren't. It's more
like, it's not set in.
Are they actually going to do this? And then going forward, it's, oh, this is coming. I don't want to watch it. I need to watch it.
And then like the logo turns white and black after. It's such an impactful way to use the character.
The worst part of that scene for me, and then we can move on to your number 5.
Okay.
Is Hera's reaction.
Oh, and then the whole next episode is they really give you the time to just deal with it.
Yeah.
And I praise the Acolyte in that episode where they gave Master Soul like 30 seconds to just feel his feelings. The fact that they gave you an entire episode to let the main cast feel their feelings, I think even furthers this decision. So excellent number 5, Dan.
Thank you. So,
not on my list. It is a little bit of a downer.
It is a bit of a downer. That's why it's at number 5.
But it's powerful. It
is.
While Kanan may not be alive anymore, Star Wars certainly is.
Yes.
Because his sacrifice leads to so many amazing things.
I feel like we might hear Kanan's voice again.
Oh, don't get me all excited. Anyway, that takes me to my number 5, which is very, 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 very recent compared to some of the stuff we're talking about. And that would be the duel on Kofar and the Acolyte.
That was, yeah.
Are we talking about that for you?
No.
Okay.
That was, I'll just tip my hand a little bit. I have no Acolyte whatsoever.
And I almost didn't. But I was like, Dan and I were for work at a conference, and we had separately decided to watch this episode. And I was on like FaceTime with my wife, and I was like, "What is happening?" Spoiler alert for the Acolyte if you haven't. So just if you're listening, if you're in the shower, cooking, give you a second to pause and skip forward a few minutes. But they're killing you. You form these attachments to these characters, and then they're killing them over and over and over again. You got Cortosis shutting off the lightsabers. You got the reveal of Chimere. And you get to see this sweet fight to really see how powerful the Stranger is and how powerful Master Soul is. It's just amazing. I loved it.
We just briefly talked about impactful deaths.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like some shows, again, I've said this before, Game of Thrones, a lot of gratuitous violence, a lot of killing off.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see many people just get killed off in Star Wars, let alone in the gruesome manner that they did.
Gruesome, and like they were on the poster. They were making the action figures. They had you thinking both in the story and all the stuff the cues we're used to for important characters outside of the story with the poster and the action figures, that these were going to be very important characters going forward, and they are very important characters.
They made it halfway through the series.
But I think the bold choice to show the power of the stranger, Chimere, by sacrificing these characters who we know are great Jedi, powerful Jedi, really was just kind of crazy.
I'll talk about it in a little bit, but just the pure power of the Sith.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really see that in Star Wars. We see bits and pieces of cool scenes where they flex their power very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
We got to watch Chimere go almost God mode
Mm-hmm.
for half an episode.
Let's not forget he floated down prior.
Yeah,
And then he had a secret lightsaber.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Cool helmet, the cutoff, no movement restriction.
No.
I feel like could have saved some of the Jedi. Seriously though, like
Soul never took his robe off. Even Obi-Wan takes his robe off.
I know Obi-Wan's just a drama queen. He does it for effect.
Obi-Wan is a little bit of a drama queen, but yeah, I loved it. It was very much so challenging for me to not feel like this was recency bias, but I tried to put myself down the road.
You can be a fan of the Jedi or the Sith, because we know there are people will choose a side. The rule of cool. The Sith are cool.
I'm a Jedi man.
My favorite character is a Sith. Some call him a visionary.
Some call him Count Dracula.
Because he did play Count Dracula.
He did. Count Ducula. Anyway.
You could watch that scene, not being a Star Wars fan, and be like, darn, that's cool.
Seriously.
I mean, graphic, but very cool.
Uh-huh.
Jackie getting hole punched.
Oh, poor Jackie. Anyway, that's my number 5. What do you got for number 4?
My number 4 is episode 1 of The Mandalorian.
Oh, I have no Mandalorian on my list, so I'm happy that we're getting to talk about it.
Episode 1 of The Mandalorian was so different for me.
Mm-hmm.
Just new. I was excited about it, and I went into it pretty open, and they just waltz in this cool character from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need any backstory to know, okay, this guy's pretty cool.
And he walks into the cool circular door and his cape's floating in the wind.
And this might be higher on my list because the build up to it, and then it lived up to the hype.
See, for me, the build up to The Mandalorian, and I think this we might be able to get to the bottom of why this is on your list and not mine. The build up to The Mandalorian, it was like this underworld show. You're going to be in the trenches with the bounty hunter. And I was like, who cares? Then, at the end of this episode, which if you're okay with me getting there.
Go right ahead.
That's when I was like, oh, I'm in. They have a baby Yoda.
They have baby Yoda. We have Imperial remnants.
Cool action scenes is the canon. IG-11.
Cool ship. R.I.P. the Razor. R.I.P.S. the Razor Crest. Rest in pieces. Such a good show. I think it lived up to the hype. The soundtrack was fantastic.
Oh my god, and it was so different.
Yes. It was just so good. I remember watching it for the first time and I'm like, this is amazing.
It really, really, really was. And I'm happy to be able to talk about that because while it hasn't gotten up there for me in terms of beating out some of the stuff we're going to talk about, I love The Mandalorian. And we really haven't talked about it much
we haven't
since we started, so maybe we can do that.
Yeah.
Anything else to add on this?
No, it's just
fantastic.
So good.
It really is.
Season 1 especially, so different. You get this great quest. You were rooting for the main characters the whole time.
Almost all new characters, too, which is, as we talked about with The Acolyte, very exciting.
And then we got just enough from older Star Wars to be like, kind of like we talked about with Ezra rebuilding his lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and there's the Darksaber.
Yep. Yeah, no, that was crazy. But that's a great number 4. My number 4, one that you probably saw coming from a country mile away. And I made a fib when we were talking about this, and you were like, oh, I'm sure this is going to be on there. And I lied. I did put it on here. It wasn't. I switched it. This is Ben Solo and Rey having that pass the lightsaber moment behind their back. I remember when, and this is on Exegol, and then he uses the lightsaber to fight the Knights of Ren. I remember when they did the rain situation in The Last Jedi on Kylo's hand. Like, you saw the rain from Octo go on his hand. I was like, what is this? Why are they doing? I'm so confused by this. I don't understand this. And the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. They're passing the lightsaber between other, because I was like, he's screwed.
Yeah.
And he does the cute little like Han Solo like shrug. Ah.
Did you ever see Die Hard?
Uh-huh.
It's the scene where John McClane straps a gun to his back.
Uh-huh.
I'll do it. Yes. Oh, poor me.
But it's a lightsaber. And I'll talk forever about how I wish that they gave Ben Solo the ability to survive and we could see his story going forward. But I thought what we got of this was insane. And the fact that he gets to use the Skywalker lightsaber and Leia's lightsaber stays with Rey because she was, her Jedi master. Mm-hmm. I think it was such a powerful moment, highlighting the connection between the two and the unique Force connection between the two.
Yes. So good.
You like it?
It was, again, like I said earlier, it just gets better with time. We saw Force Awakens pretty recently in concert. Again, if you ever have the opportunity to go see a movie in concert with an orchestra, regardless of the movie, do it. Well worth it. Absolutely fantastic. But so good. It fitting end to a fantastic character.
It really is. And then that kind of snowballs, like that's the big like, and this kind, it's not on my list, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because I want to. When they meet after this and they both raise their lightsabers at the same time, it's short-lived after that, but just that scene of them seeing them standing together with lightsabers, I'm getting chills thinking about it right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, your number 3, Daniel.
My number 3 isn't necessarily a moment, but it's the Force Awakens trailer.
I remember where I was when I watched it for the first time.
So was I. I was in class. I was in high school. I was in 10th grade. I was in World Cultures in the basement of my high school.
Oh my God.
And our teacher stopped class and put it on the projector. It was fantastic. The cinematography, and we just haven't had Star Wars in so long. And then you see TIE fighters coming over the horizon. Mm-hmm. We see lightsabers. We see new stormtroopers. Oh, so good.
And I know George Lucas is given, and fans, I think, kind of latched onto it, some flack towards the sequel trilogy for using similar imagery and iconography like the TIE Fighter and the X-Wing. But I think it kind of was important to get people back in to use that as like a Star Wars is back. And not the Star Wars that you all kind of hated, even though the appreciation and love of the prequels, which we both have, is growing and continuing to grow. I think it was important for general audience to be like, we have TIE Fighters, we have the Falcon, we have X-Wings, we've got your favorite 3 characters, even though Luke's in it for approximately 20 seconds. It got me ready, and that cool Kylo lightsaber hit, man.
I was pumped.
The trailers for, honestly, I think particularly The Rise of Skywalker and Force Awakens had incredibly strong trailers. Mm-hmm. It this one, it just really got you back. You saw BB-8 for the first time. I remember being like, oh my god, what is that? Like one of my favorite classes was an engineering class, and I had downloaded and 3D printed a little BB-8. Mm-hmm. It was like my first piece of BB-8 merchandise. I ended up getting rid of it once I got real stuff. But, I was like so excited. The hype leading up to The Force Awakens was unparalleled to anything I've ever seen.
I agree.
Even like Avengers Endgame. I know it made more money and stuff, but The Force Awakens was a special time to be a Star Wars fan.
It really was. 2015. Mm-hmm. So good.
Oh, man.
You could... The hype, like you said, the hype behind it. Everybody was talking about it.
Cans of pineapple had Kylo Ren on it. He was on. They were everywhere,
and everybody knew about it. Uh-huh. You could today, you can talk to a random person on the street and be like, "Oh, did you see the new Star Wars show?" Or if you heard of The Acolyte, and people will be like, "Probably not." Mm-hmm. But Force Awakens at that time was everywhere. Was on, like you said, on food. They were on
Coffee Mate Creamer.
Coffee Mate. They were on shows. They were promoting it literally everywhere. Great time to be a Star Wars fan.
Seriously, I was the first time. One of the first times I had went to New York City was December of 2015, like early, and there were just billboards everywhere for Force Awakens, and it was just so cool. Anything else to add on that?
No.
So for me, now moving on to my number 3, and I have to say, the next 3 things I'm going to talk about, I think if we did this tomorrow, I would reorganize them differently.
Okay.
I'm not going to make a last minute change. Okay, my number 3 is we're on Starkiller Base in The Force Awakens. Finn just got decimated by Kylo Ren. and the lightsaber shaking in the snow, and then it flies to Rey's hand.
Yeah.
Is that yeah? I keep asking every time, but that's not one you're talking about.
I'll stop you.
I should not.
I'll stop
okay.
you if you need to stop.
So this was when again, leading up to The Force Awakens, all the marketing led us to believe that Finn was the one that's going to wield the lightsaber.
I mean, you can picture, I can picture the poster of Finn holding the lightsaber in Poe's jacket, and you're like, okay,
this guy's cool. And Finn is cool. Finn's a wonderful character. And I know there's a lot of, I think there are problems with what had happened. And I understand why that might alienate John Boyega a little bit and why he might wish things were different. And I think there will be a chance for him to wield his lightsaber in the future. But
what color do you think it'll be?
Green.
Yeah.
I think I'll look good with yellow. And someone else have blue. And it'll be like 3 of them. I don't know. That's just what I have in my mind.
Grogu gets green.
Old Ezra?
Nah, he's dead.
Okay. The ghost was at Exegol. It's Jason. Anyway. I
feel like we'll be talking about that in Skeleton Crew pretty soon.
Maybe. But they for me, this was just like, oh my God, this is the new Jedi.
Yeah.
It's not Finn. It's her. And I just remember sitting in the theater like, well, that's my new favorite character. And I haven't gone back since. And one thing I want to Dan mentioned that we had recently had the opportunity to see The Force Awakens with the symphony and go see the movie. And when Han Solo appeared, people clapped. When Leia appeared, people clapped. It was like when you saw these big Star Wars moments, the audience was clapping, and it warmed my heart so much to see when Rey grabbed the lightsaber, just as loud as when Han Solo showed up on screen, the people were clapping, and I was like, "We're in."
Yeah,
we're in. The people are good. Like, I think the sequel trilogy is going to age just like the prequel trilogy, and this is just like one of the most powerful moments from it for me.
Yes, it was so good. And it took everybody by surprise, including Kylo Ren. Obviously,
that might make it even better.
Yeah,
and then the lightsaber fight after is so cool. And I'm going to hold my tongue, and we're going to talk about it later.
Rey, fueled by rage, closest she ever got to leading up to her Palpatine name.
Oh dear, which we didn't know at that point.
I know,
but I remember the videos of she kind of did the stabby.
Yeah, no, she was trying to kill him.
No, I mean, you don't blame her,
and it makes sense. People complain about the choreography of the lightsaber fights, some of them in the sequel trilogy.
See, I want to talk about this. Go ahead.
It makes total sense for Rey to hold her own against Kylo Ren in this moment. He's been shot. He's been sliced. He is fighting at 50%. And she is fighting.
He just killed his dad.
She is fighting on pure adrenaline. Makes total sense.
And she has experience fighting. Maybe not with a lightsaber, but she's experienced fighting. And speaking of lightsaber choreography, I did want to say that for me, I love the prequel lightsabers fights. There's nothing like it. They're like interpretive dances. How cool they are. But I love the rawness of the sequels. Like Rey and Kylo Ren clearly know what to do in a fight. But they're not lightsaber experts. They're not doing the Anakin twirl.
Yeah.
And for me, I love that rawness where it feels like they're actually trying to kill each other.
They're fighting with emotion.
And I love it. I love it.
Like the reason Count Dooku has a curved lightsaber hilt is because it's easier for him to put more force onto his opponent in a duel. It is more, like you said, more of an art form. They practice it. They'd be excellent fencers.
Like Kylo and Rey aren't using the lightsaber forms as...
Kylo and Rey are going for the kill shot, trying to cut the other's arm off.
And I think that speaks to the state that their respective, dark side / Sith eventually in the Rise of Skywalker, or Jedi, where the state of where they are right now. It's like Palpatine has gotten his fingers into ruining kind of everything that there isn't really a Sith at this moment. There's Kylo Ren, who's kind of, just... Sith adjacent.
Yeah, he's vibing.
And then Rey is...
He's an acolyte.
I'm not going to dispute that. Anyway, want to go to your number 2? Because, I could talk about this moment for
My
years.
number 2 is another scene. This is a scene from The Mandalorian. Do you want to take a guess at what it is?
Luke Skywalker hallway scene?
Luke Skywalker's arrival. Just the whole Luke Skywalker. And
Dan loves Luke Skywalker. He doesn't talk about it as much as Dooku, but...
Just something about me. Return of the Jedi, favorite movie. So good. grew up on that movie. So getting to see Luke dressed in black with his green lightsaber doing cool Luke stuff.
And he gets to kill droids in the way that the prequel Jedi get to kill droids.
And you get to see, like, kind of like I mentioned earlier, they hardly flash their power.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't do it very often. But you see him just force crush droids, throw people anywhere, and you get to see the fear in Moff Gideon's eyes of this mythical being of Luke Skywalker showing up. You could tell he was like, uh-oh.
This isn't good.
Like, this guy wasn't... I thought that he was a myth. And the scene gets even more impactful when you remember what Moff Gideon did.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the ISB. He was in intelligence. He knows of Luke Skywalker. He knows that he's the one responsible for blowing up the Death Star twice.
Indirectly, but more or less twice.
Directly once, indirectly once.
Yeah. And then not just the actual fantastically cool lightsaber fight, but the entrance too, like you were kind of alluding to, is like you see the X-Wing.
And
then you see a black cloak. Then you see a lightsaber.
Plo Koon.
Then you see it's a green lightsaber, and you're like, "Oh my god, it's Luke!"
Because we didn't see the color until he got closer, because they were showing on security cameras,
Yeah,
right?
like, it was like black and white.
Yeah,
so you see a lightsaber, but it's like you don't know what it is, and like you're like, "It's Luke. It's got to be Luke."
It has to be. Who else would it be?
Uh huh.
I mean, when was it Cara Dune who says, or is it
Cara Dune or Bo-Katan
says, "Oh, they sent a single X-wing."
Yeah, it sounds like a Cara Dune line.
Like, "Oh, thanks," and you're like, "Oh, is this Carson Teva
Oh, come on, let's go.
defying orders?"
It's a Dave Filoni.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
No,
I get chills thinking about it. You can see it.
I can see it. It's so good. And like I know people have their issues with the mocap, and maybe this would have been a key moment for them to replace with another actor, but I don't think that takes away from the power of the scene for me. I love it. And you get to see R2 again. You get it is very, very nice.
It checked a lot of boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And again, some of the complaints of the sequel trilogy is that they were going to check boxes instead of telling a story. At least from what I've heard.
That is what people say. I disagree with it, but
I know that's what people say. But this scene checked boxes. That's what it was there for. Except they incorporated it in a meaningful way.
Like, who else would it be?
Plo Koon.
Seriously, who else would it be? Plo Koon's dead. I know Dave Filoni tricked people by saying it was Plo Koon, but like, who else at that time in the galaxy would respond to a call from a Jedi youngling?
That's just it. And
it's
that's
Luke Skywalker.
That's why the fear in Moff Gideon's eyes, before we knew anything, he knew what was up.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on it, it's like, oh my goodness, how could this not be Luke Skywalker?
Absolutely. Anything else to add about it?
I could talk about that all day.
Me too. It's a very special moment. I have that Lego set.
I know you do. So do I.
It's very cool.
And you can move them.
Yeah, no. No, it's good. For me, my number 2 is the entirety of the throne room fight scene in The Last Jedi. OMG. Never have I been more surprised in the theater. Because, like, you're used to your kind of cadence. Like, there's the big bad guy. There's the smaller bad guy. Your Palpatine and your Vader, if you will. Well, obviously, Kylo Ren will either be killed or turned. And then in episode 9, you're going to fight Snoke. And then you're like, no. Turns out you're not going to fight Snoke. And on top of not getting... So you don't get a true lightsaber fight in this movie. But in place of it, you get this amazing fight between Rey and Kylo on a team and the Praetorian Guards.
Yes.
Oh, my God. It was on some of the cool... And again, getting back to that, like, raw... Like, they're fighting to survive in this fight.
Yeah.
And there's no trickery or action about it. Or trickery or, like, pageantry about it.
They are going up against qualified opponents.
Maybe more qualified than either of them.
Yes. And I think a lot of people forget, just because we've seen the Praetorian Guard get absolutely curb stomped by Yoda, throws him against the wall in Revenge of the Sith. Palpatine tells him to leave in Return of the Jedi. But, like, if you go into the lore of the Praetorian Guard, they're pretty stone-cold killers. Because
that's technically the Imperial Guard at that point. Then the Praetorian Guard show up in The Mandalorian. And they're ruthless. They kill Paz Vizsla in Season 3?
Yeah.
Those are, like, the precursors, I think, to the ones we see.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, they're clearly, like, an elite team that's there to protect Snoke. And I don't know, like, when you see the lightsaber turn and you're like, he's not going to do it. And then, like, I thought, my optimistic self, that he was going to be, like, a good guy now. It's like, oh my God, he's going to be a good guy. No.
You're nothing.
Yeah, and then proceeds to insult Rey. But I love that they have to end the work together, and like for them to win, Rey has to throw the lightsaber to Ben, and he turns it on, puts a whole. He's Kylo at that point. Yeah.
Sorry to rain on your parade.
No,
you can hold out your hand. You can hold out your hand. It'll come down from Octo.
Not as much as JJ rained on my parade when he killed him. Anyway, I love it. It's one of my favorite things, and I just that feeling being in the theater for that was like you could hear a gasp. I was like, oh my God, what is happening? And there's a lot of stuff about The Last Jedi that I struggle with even still. A lot of decisions that I think influence like might have made it more difficult to make in Episode 9.
Mm-hmm.
But this is something that's truly special about it. One of the many things it is.
Yeah.
Anything else to add?
So cool. And the red, everything was red. Just the cinematography. Red everything. Praetorian Guard was red. Throne Room was red. And then we have the duality of dark and light fighting together.
And the red and blue, in the red and blue lightsabers. Then the red starts to catch on fire, and you start to see the space coming through from behind. Ooh. Ooh.
So good.
Man. That's my number 2. Dan, would you like to kick off your number 1?
Yes, I've alluded to it earlier.
Uh-huh.
You want to say what it is?
No, go ahead.
It is the end of Rogue One, the Vader hallway scene. Oh my God. Darth Vader, again, almost like Luke, this mythical creature that everybody's heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Very few get to see. And those who do don't usually live to tell the tale. And we saw this in person. We got to see Darth Vader turn off all of his safeguards and go crazy in a room with people who could not defend themselves.
Uh-huh. And it's like it takes the scene from the Acolyte that we were talking about, which is like equally matched opponents relatively, or at least somewhat prepared, and it's like this feels like you're playing a video game against unarmed characters.
It feels like I'm playing Fallen Order. On like easy mode.
Against like a basic stormtrooper.
Yeah. Pulling them, throwing them, crushing them.
Honestly, it feels like the Force Unleashed if you ever played that. Even ridiculous power. More ridiculous power.
Yeah, so good. And they found a way to make it meaningful too.
Mm-hmm.
Showing that just how close the rebellion was to not succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
How close the plans were. And it also showed that Jyn and Cassian's sacrifice was not, and the rest of the people on Scarif were not in vain. But seeing Vader come down the hallway and just how close he got.
Mm-hmm. It much like we were saying about Luke Skywalker, though. It's like, it's super cool. It strengthens the story in terms of getting the plans to the rebellion. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense. Who else would they send on such a sensitive, important mission?
Right.
But Darth Vader.
Yeah. And
it's so good.
He got to do what he had to do. I mean, the first time we saw him Force choke was in A New Hope. Poor Star Wars trivia person blanking on the name of the captain.
Antilles. No,
that's Wedge.
Well, there's another Captain Antilles. I think it's Captain Antilles, but we'll just leave it be. Say maybe not.
We got to see Vader go untouched. Super cool. Made me feel like I was playing Battlefront. Oh, so good.
It's fantastic.
And then when he stabs the guy through the door.
It is Captain Ramus Antilles, by the way.
Good job. That's why. So if you guys haven't heard, on May the 4th, we went to Star Wars Trivia. Joey, his wife, myself, and my girlfriend. Joey got every single question right. He was the team. It would make sense that he would know that.
Dan, we also go to trivia very often, and Dan knows everything else and a lot about Star Wars.
Except music.
I just specialize in Star Wars. It's a little obnoxious, but it's okay.
Not obnoxious. Just
a hair. The guy I yelled at because he said that The Rise of Skywalker was bad probably thinks it was obnoxious.
He was wearing a shirt that had First Order stuff on it.
Yeah,
so sequels can't be that bad.
I think he thinks Star Wars is alive. He just doesn't know it yet. Anything else to add about your number 1?
I could watch it all day. I could watch it on
loop. It's one of those scenes that's special.
The scene where Vader is standing in the bay where the Tantive 4 just narrowly escaped. With his cape flapping in the vacuum of space. With the lightsaber ignited.
Yes.
It's just cool.
And as I've said, Rogue One is not my favorite Star Wars, but this gets me every time.
So, fun fact, Rogue One grew on me. When I was not a huge fan when I first watched it. The first thing I said that when I walked out of the theater was, that was a good bridge. that's it. And then it took me a rewatch, and I'm like, okay, this is sweet for so many different reasons.
Well, if you, as I kind of alluded to our Obi-Wan rewind and rewatch episode, Dan and I are going to do, I'm a massive sequels fan. Dan loves the sequels, but likes or loves? What would you say?
They're growing on me.
Dan, we want to make each other understand why he loves Andor and Rogue One and why I love the sequel so much.
Yes.
So, anything else to add on your number one?
No, I'm anxious.
That takes us to my number one. And I told Dan I was going to kind of break the rules. But I said, we set the rules, so it's okay. But I'm picking one concept for my number one. If you could make a trailer one moment, I see why I couldn't do this.
There's no need to justify it. It's just us.
I'm justifying it. I'm used to justifying. I'm used to criticism. But my number one moment is the world between worlds from both Rebels and Ahsoka. Like I pulled that in there.
Yeah, I mean...
And I think both moments serve a similar purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start with Rebels. I had watched Rebels like live as it was airing from the beginning. Like I said, throughout high school and college. At the end of season 2 is when Ahsoka, her fight with Vader on Malachor is. You essentially are left to assume that she's either dying or she died or there's some sort of force ghost. You saw her like walking into the temple, but you were kind of confused by what that was. Mm-hmm. We still aren't fully, clear on what happened. But that was 2 years of not knowing what Ahsoka's fate was. And when Ezra pulled Ahsoka out of that portal, I literally shot out of my couch. I shot up out of my couch and like threw my hands on my head. And my wife hadn't watched Rebels yet. So I was like, I can't even tell anyone about this. No one I know watches this. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I was like, this is insane. And then on top of that, in the rest of that episode, you get to see Ezra like learn the choice about not saving Kanan and like how his sacrifice kept them alive, like you were saying. So it all connects to everything we're talking about. And then you kind of find that was an illusion from Palpatine. Like his markings around that portal were the same as Palpatine. So you see Ezra and Ahsoka encounter Palpatine, voiced by Ian McDermott. That on its own was insane to me.
Yeah.
Then you get to Ahsoka, and it's a little different in the way it was portrayed, but still the world between worlds. And you see this insane fight with Anakin and these flashbacks and everything. I think it's such a cool way and such a trippy thing that I didn't fully understand the first time I watched it. Mm-hmm. And like the more I love weird Force stuff. I tell Dan this all the time.
I know.
They do nuts things with the Force dyad, passing things in between, making the twins and the acolyte. I love the weird Force stuff.
Yeah.
So this is about as crazy and wacky, other than Mortis, as the Force stuff gets.
Which I think we might be coming back to.
And I think it's all going to be connected.
Has to be.
It has to be. Dave knows what he's doing. And it just, this for me is like the pinnacle of like, it's not a multiverse. It's not, but it gives you this means of doing so many cool things that, again, the Anakin thing. Mm-hmm. Who else would be in there trying to communicate to Ahsoka?
Yeah.
And we get to see Anakin with a red lightsaber, him morph into Vader, while also being incredibly impactful and helping Ahsoka get through everything that she, like her baggage of dealing with the fact that her master was Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
The whole Anakin-Ahsoka interactions are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, after Season 8 of The Clone Wars, the series finale, and if you guys haven't listened to it or watched it, you should watch it.
Absolutely.
Spoiler alert, it's been out for a couple of years now. When Anakin goes to the crash site, or excuse me, when Darth Vader goes to the crash site and finds Ahsoka's lightsaber and turns it on. So impactful. And there's a tweet that circulated saying, Darth Vader did not have to go to a desolate planet to a single crash site where 2 people survived.
Mm-hmm.
But Anakin did.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see in Rebels the Anakin-Ahsoka connection. So good. Get to see it in live action.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing Ahsoka through the training, through everything. They did it so well. And cool lightsabers.
Cool. I mean, what more can the world between worlds offer you? This insane fight between Anakin and Ahsoka, live action Hayden Christensen Anakin, and
Clone Wars armor Anakin too.
Clone Wars armor Anakin. But live action Rex happens all in the context of this world between worlds. But then again, back to what we were first saying: Palpatine, Ezra, Ahsoka. It just really has this special, like, I think if this were on a movie screen, which I know they did do the screening of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't do it around Pittsburgh where we are, but they, this is something that would stick out to me, just like the Last Jedi throne room.
Yeah,
like Rey grabbing the lightsaber. It sticks with me in my mind right now.
Mm-hmm.
As if you like, clearly it's my number one.
Yeah,
but yeah, I anything else to add on that?
No, I do want to make a comment. All of the 10 things we mentioned.
7.
8.
We each mentioned 8.
Well, 10. The top 10.
Oh, our top 10. Sorry, I thought you were talking about the honorable mention. Sorry.
I mean, honestly, the 16 things we talked about. You could watch them now, and they will be just as impactful as they were the first time you watched them,
if not more, depending on how maybe things have been recontextualized.
Yeah, you can't recreate the hype behind the Force Awakens trailer.
No,
but you can still watch and be like, "This was cool then. I remember how I felt."
And I can see now, you can almost retroactively see, oh, maybe I misinterpreted. And I think we could get into this with The Last Jedi whenever we watch and talk about that. Maybe I misinterpreted what I thought was going to happen going in, and that affected my enjoyment of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of, we can kind of now transition out of our list into Star Wars is Alive. We talked about some of the most powerful moments in Star Wars here, not just of recent years. Mm-hmm. These things, I think, stand up to the most incredible moments from the original and prequel trilogies.
Absolutely.
For me, honestly, I grew up with the originals and prequels. I watched them constantly. Mm-hmm. Constantly. I love them with all my heart. Some of these moments exceed moments from there for me. Some of them, maybe not as much, but these movies are just as special to me. These shows are just as special to me as the originals. It's all one thing to me. It's not Disney Star Wars, George Lucas Star Wars. It's just Star Wars for me.
Yes. There's a reason the logo does not have the Disney on it.
Mm-hmm.
Just doesn't.
No.
It's Star Wars. It's the same stuff. Not same stuff, It's the same story. And honestly, Disney buying Star Wars or Disney acquiring Lucasfilms, fantastic for the show.
For me, I think it's so much who knows? It could just be sitting there. It might. We might not have ever got anything ever again. And I think it's selfish of you to be like, George Lucas defiling his memory. If George Lucas didn't want someone to make Star Wars, he wouldn't have sold it.
Exactly. And now Star Wars is at a place where they have the budget to do anything they want with it.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as people are interacting with it, still being excited about it, they're going to keep putting things out.
And this went from something that old movie that my dad showed me, and then it came out when I was a kid,
mm-hmm.
to now something that we, God willing, can show our kids,
mm-hmm.
and as however long it goes, they can show their kids, and it's something everyone has their own entry point, and everyone's own entry point is special. Mine was Attack of the Clones, without a doubt. It's not my favorite thing, but it's always special to me because it was my oh my God, I have all the toys from it.
Yeah,
it's whatever. But The Rise of Skywalker, The Last Jedi, Rebels, Battlefront 2, all these
Galaxy's
things
Edge.
Galaxy's Edge.
If you guys haven't, we recently put out a little "Is Galaxy's Edge worth it?" where one of us is gone, one of us hasn't. But that is how some people are introduced to Star Wars. If you go to Disney World or Disneyland and you stumble into Galaxy's Edge, that could be your first introduction to Star Wars.
And you fly the Falcon, and you're like, maybe I should watch this.
This is cool.
Uh-huh. I will say, actually, and I brought this up then. So if you haven't listened to it, if you have listened to it, thank you. If you haven't, please consider. But one of my buddies who we went with is not the biggest Star Wars fan. He's seen them, but he built a lightsaber, and the way that they treat it is very, very special. Mm-hmm. Something we talked about. And after we did that, you put your Kyber crystal in. They make you feel very special about your lightsaber. And he was like, I'm ready to learn the lore. It just, everything they're doing, Andor's not for me. It's okay. The Acolyte might not be for you.
Yeah.
But not you, Dan.
No,
I know. The listener.
I know. Thank you.
Sorry.
You know me. I hate the Acolyte.
No. So people do, and it's okay. I just think as long as you go into it with the mentality of, I'm going to watch this show, and I'm going to, I'll use a phrase that Force Center always says. If you haven't listened to Force Center podcast, you really should as well. But they always say, engage with the story that's presented to you.
Yeah.
And whenever I heard that the first time, I was like, maybe it doesn't matter if Luke didn't have his green lightsaber in The Last Jedi.
No.
Maybe what matters is what they're trying to tell me.
Yeah.
And I think that was the frame shift that I needed.
We as Star Wars fans love to hyperfocus. We just do. We see any little detail and we hyperfixate on it. We speculate. We don't have to.
No, we don't have to.
For example, the Luke's green lightsaber. The reason Luke has a green lightsaber to begin with is because he couldn't use his blue one on the blue screen. And that's why we have green lightsabers. That is it. And if we hyperfixate, well, Luke was strong with the Force. That's why his kyber crystal was green. We can miss the story of
That's
what's
it. And
presented.
maybe it may Ben Solo just broke that blue lightsaber. So Luke showing up with that lightsaber that he knew Ben Solo had an attachment to, and he just broke. It had to confuse him so much.
It was psychological. Luke did not bring out a blue lightsaber for us. He brought out a blue lightsaber, the blue lightsaber, for Kylo Ren, who he knew was in that AT-AT.
And I think people go, it's just fan service. Also, I'm happy we're talking about this. This is a shadow one that I wanted to mention, so thank you.
You're welcome.
But this is, I just think that people complain about fan service, but then when they're not serviced, they get upset. I think fan service can be done incredibly well.
Vader hallway scene is fan service.
100%, and it's fantastic.
Luke hallway
and it fits.
scene, fan service.
Fantastic, and it fits. I think Palpatine coming back for the Rise of Skywalker, a bold choice, a choice that I understand not everybody loves. For me, it's fan service, but I loved it. It's like who else? Yes, you could put a new character, but it's not going to be as powerful.
Yeah,
These movies all need to mesh,
and the movies will get fleshed out by the shows. The reason some people have such an attachment to the prequels is because of the Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. You can watch the Clone Wars and the prequels are so much better. And that's where we are at right now with Star Wars. Mm-hmm. If you don't believe me, I'm sorry. That's where it is. All signs, all all Star Wars projects right now, Mandalorian, Ahsoka, Andor, are all pointing you towards the First Order. Bad Batch.
Especially the Mandoverse stuff.
The Mandoverse. Exactly. We are going to see the First Order. That is how this is going to end, and we are going to, which will make the First Order that much more impactful. The Force Awakens. We now get this information about this group that rose to power and turned Ilum into a super cool planet destroyer.
Exactly. And it's just, think about all the just things we haven't talked about. Video games. We talked about Fallen Order a little. Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor, Battlefront 2. Some of the strongest Star Wars stories I've seen.
Lego.
Anything with Lego. Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga was fantastic. All the fun Lego shorts. There's just so much and something for every single person.
Yes.
Not everything might be for you, but I think we can happily, from our passion and just this little sliver of mentions that we've come up with here, can happily say that Star Wars is alive, right?
I 1,000% agree. Star Wars is alive.
I would argue more alive than ever.
Yes. We are getting, I saw a tweet today that they expect to put out 3 Star Wars movies between 2026 and 2027. A Rey
movie?
So we'll probably get a Rey movie, a Mandoverse movie.
And then they had said the Mando and Grogu is one of them, the Rey movie, and then the Dave Filoni movie that's like the culmination of the Mandoverse stuff.
Okay, so is the Taika Waititi thing still happening?
It's tabled.
Okay.
There's a Sean Levy one, the guy that directed Deadpool and Wolverine. He's in talks to make a movie. There's some other stuff that's going on, but those are the confirmed ones. And then James Mangold, Dawn of the Jedi movie. So way, even before the Acolyte.
Yeah.
Way before the first Jedi. That's probably the one I'm least excited about. But
which means it's going to be the one you're going to love the most.
It's possible.
I can just picture it now. I have the first lightsaber. It's on its way.
I feel like you're going to make me eat my words 10 years from now.
I'll put a reminder.
Hopefully we're still on the air.
Yeah, maybe we'll be in a studio then.
Maybe. Anything else to add?
No. Star Wars is alive. That's the last thing I'm going to say.
Star Wars is alive. Please consider giving us a like. Let's start. Thank you so much for listening.
Yes.
We really appreciate it. We are still a relatively new podcast. We're trying to gain our footing, get a regular schedule up with what's going to be releasing. And this is a show we want to have be a regular thing.
Yeah, so keep an eye out. We are currently releasing once a week.
we're currently releasing some show once a week. We're going to start to doing a 2-time-a-week release schedule, and I think we're going to do one of these Star Wars Live ranking shows every other week.
Yes.
Our next one, I think I've kind of already decided this. We haven't fully talked about
Go
it,
ahead.
but our favorite lightsabers.
Yes.
That's going to be the next one. So that'll be coming out in 2 weeks or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it should be very fun. So
think
we're
you
just
don't
going to
mind.
keep the positivity train rolling about our favorite things in Star Wars. We're not always going to keep it to like the newer stuff. We just wanted that to be like proof that this is alive.
Yes.
And then we're going to take and run. We're going to include the whole saga, books, all of that, anything.
And we want to hear from you.
Absolutely.
What is your top Star Wars moment? Why do you think Star Wars is alive? If you do, or if you don't, let us know.
Mm-hmm.
We would love to discuss it. And if you write us or leave us a comment, we'll discuss it. And we'll hope to either agree with you or maybe just shed a little bit more light on why we disagree.
Absolutely. All right. With that, thank you so much again for listening. Please consider giving us a like or subscription on YouTube or the podcast platform of your choice. Again, on YouTube, that's Blue Shadow Podcast. Give us a follow on Twitter or X at Blue Shadow Pod or on Instagram at Blue Shadow Podcast. And consider checking out our Facebook page. With that, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.